On this week's Digital Restaurant, we talked to Tony Isles, who started Tony Delivers in Seattle. There's a lot going on in Seattle, particularly the pay up legislation, which has affected some restaurants and their delivery sales down from 30 to 50% from what was happening before the ordinance went into effect. Tony has started his business, Tony Delivers, and we're excited to talk to him today on the Digital Restaurant. Hey, Tony, one of the things that it's rare for us to meet people in the space that are trying to disrupt it. We thought we'd met them all, and then we came across your name. So I'm glad we're able to speak to you. Unfortunately, we've written our books now. You're not in the books, but you're definitely the type of person we would have spoken to back in the day when we were trying to figure out who's trying to disrupt this environment. But nice to meet you today.
Nice to meet you as well.
How did you get into it, Tony? What got you into food delivery?
I was delivering before with Uber Eats and DoorDash, and the law went into place, and I wasn't really a driver in the first place. I thought of myself more as I was like trying to start businesses. I had a couple businesses that had failed, and then I was like, oh, this is gonna work. So me and my buddy, we were at a bar, and he was like, you should start your own business. And then I watched the DoorDash VC video of how they got started, and I went back to my dungeon and proceeded to pump out Tony Delivers and the logo and everything. And a few days later, the news took my story, and people were like, how long have you been in business? And I was like, a couple days. It's great. And now we're here, and I hope to be able to make a positive impact on the environment. I think there's a lack of empowerment right now, and I'm trying to bring that back a little bit.
So you were delivering for one of the platforms before the ordinance went into effect, but just as a side hustle as you were starting some of the other businesses that you were involved in.
Yeah, it really was a true side hustle for me. Part of the reason why I always kept doing it was like, it gave me so much freedom in terms of time. But I think as I began to examine the argument of like why Seattle did what they did and why New York City did what they did, why Prop 22 is such a big issue, my reflection on this became, oh, wow, it's a lose for everybody involved except the delivery services. I think that there's definitely a healthy margin to cut into their lead right now. And when I look at their lead, I think that their lead is not. I had more orders at a few restaurants than Grubhub did a few weeks ago. And Grubhub is advertising. They have all these deals for their customers. So that tells you exactly where their place is. And I don't believe DoorDash's lead or Uber Eats' impact on the market is safe. I think that, and they probably know that too.
What was it like before the ordinance went into effect, and how did things change after the ordinance went into effect?
It depends on who you ask that question to. I was a driver that kind of took everything into play. So I took every order like a good little boy for Uber Eats because that was the best way to make money. But if you were a driver and you had to foot the cost of the bill for your car or something, it probably was a terrible deal. I had delivered via car for like maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And before I said, forget this is horrible, I'm making less than minimum wage. And then I returned to my great Seabiscuit, my horse, and got back on the bike, and I was making more money. It really depends on who you're asking. And I think that's the kind of the challenge of the market. The bigger delivery service control the marketplace, and it makes it hard to play with real economic principles, just basic supply and demand.
Did you notice an impact in terms of your typical order volume, the amount of journeys that you do during that period?
Oh, I mean, it went from a lot to a little. It was practically non-existent. I think the customers that are involved are probably still to this moment upset on the price increase. The question that has to be posed here is, and I'm sure you guys have mentioned this, like why and how does DoorDash believe that delivery is going to be affordable unless they change the structure of how they're delivering? Quite frankly, I don't understand how they do their economics. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me. But yes, I saw the volume change quite drastically. And I think that the volume is still going down. The customer's behavior has changed to pick up, which at some point I'll probably see a Reddit post where somebody breaks down like the cost of pickup versus actually placing online for a restaurant storefront. And somebody will be upset about that because it's like $2 or $3 more. So
let's go to that moment when the kind of genesis of the idea of for Tony Delivers came to you. What were you doing? Where were you? How did this thing come to life in your mind?
my best friend, he had recently gotten hired at Amazon, and he's a smart guy, and we love smart guys. But we were talking about it, and he was like, "What if you just opened up your own delivery service and cut out the middleman?" And My other buddy, his girlfriend was like, what if there was a person? And I was like, oh, interesting. And then I watched the DoorDash VC video where one of the founders was talking about what did they do and why did they do it? And like this idea of like courage. And I was like, oh shit. So all I got to do is open up a delivery service and I'll get customers. Say less. Let's open it up. So I was like up until 7 in the morning, proceeded to go to the library at 10, printed out like a couple posters, got some feedback from some random strangers, and kept iterating until we got to the guy with the thumbs up. And after we put up that poster, I think probably 5 or 6 major media outlets called me, and now I'm talking to you guys.
I feel like that's true entrepreneurialism, right? From idea to business in about a 24-hour period. That's amazing. And tell us now, what has Tony Delivers become? Because it started with you delivering, but now it's expanding, right?
Yeah, we're going to have an app, but we have right now in a beta version of a format of the app, and we've been testing the bugs this week, trying to get those bugs out. And we already have, I think, 550 waitlisted people for the app, and we hope that we'll strike lightning again, and I think we will. I think that resetting the market isn't resetting it with a drone or with a little robot on Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. I actually think that the resetting the market is actually just giving the drivers a little more power, empowering them to be able to be like, this is my business, my not gig work, but flex business. And I think that what you'll see is if we empower drivers to make those decisions, they'll end up being able to iterate on the market and innovate the way that they want to. I think that's the interesting thing here is it's going to start as like drivers just delivering, but ideally, and I really don't care how you deliver. You could deliver on a skateboard, you could deliver in a plane, a train, you could deliver on a camel. I don't care how you deliver as long as you get the food there and the customer is happy and you have good customer report. That's none of my business. I don't really care. And if you want to expand your delivery service with 1,000 drones or 3 drones, you want to deliver with your best friend, whatever. I don't really care. That's not on me. That's for you to figure out. That's your basic independence and autonomy to run your business. And I think that's what we want to introduce to the market. And I think a lot of people listen to that and they go, wow, that sounds really practical, Tony. It makes a lot of sense. So why the hell isn't DoorDash doing it? I'll tell you why DoorDash isn't doing it, because they don't want to. They want to squeeze all that money for themselves. And I think that we represent a healthy profit margin as opposed to one that's bloviated and non-committed to the customer, just trying to take advantage of their behavioral psychology to force them to order more.
Hi, Carl here. Just to interrupt the show briefly to remind you that if you have yet to get your copy of either of the Delivering the Digital Restaurant books, now is the time to get one. If you head to thedigital.restaurant, you're going to be able to get the best price available. You can also listen to both books with yours truly talking about them on Audible. You can get a copy off Amazon if you'd prefer to order through them. But if you haven't got the books yet, get them. They really are going to transform the way in which you look at the restaurant industry and the way in which technology is disrupting it. We talk about the empowering of drivers. I became a dasher when we were writing the first book, and so one of the things that I often talk about in that experience is how well restaurants treated me as a driver. As you started to talk about your business and speak to other drivers, no doubt on different routes where you're waiting, what was their reception? What were they telling you about just their reflections on the overall delivery landscape in Seattle?
Yeah, they've been heartbroken. They've been hurt. They don't really understand. They've even moved markets. So instead of delivering in Seattle, they deliver in Bellevue, greater Seattle area. If you have a car, I think it's fairly better. But if you're in like a scooter or you were doing some sort of walking, they have Uber walking, and I know they don't have DoorDash walking, but essentially the market has been toppled. This is a hard thing, and that this is a political stance. I don't necessarily blame like the policymakers. I think that the policymakers are just trying to protect the person that's delivering, because they understand that if DoorDash is controlling the market and setting the market and it's not truly free and those drivers don't have that actual empowerment, then it becomes a real challenge on whether they can actually accept and reject orders that make financial sense for them. And I think that DoorDash and Uber Eats, I know on November 1st, Uber Eats just recently implemented a policy where essentially they want the lower end deliveries to be delivered. If you go to a DoorDash Reddit feed and you see a 25-mile delivery for $5, like that shouldn't exist, right? Nobody in the right mind thinks that should exist. And I think that if we polled like every single citizen in Seattle or the United States, it would be like, that's horrible. It's a horrible deal. But because DoorDash is setting the precedent and they're allowing customers to have this, the customer is unaware of what they're truly paying for. And it's also, I think, a little bit disingenuous because it also means that at some point there should be a pullback, and they're hoping that drone delivery service will be able to take advantage, and the FAA will allow drones to be flying over people's heads with food, which that maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't, who knows? But there's other ways to innovate, and I think that the innovation is really stagnated with the big players here. And when you're driven by one thing, you're not focused on innovation or trying to improve the product. Your focus is to make that green, that cheese, that cheddar, to make an extra couple bucks.
Compare Tony Delivers to a drone and a robot. How's it different?
I got a nice smile and some cool glasses. That's for one. The second thing is a better experience. I can get you an extra straw, some extra ketchup. You know what I mean? If you're going to Chipotle and you're asking a Chipotle worker at that peak busy time to get you an extra straw, guess what? You're probably not going to get it. That's the incentive here, giving that quality back to the customer, while also to drivers, making them feel a little bit more whole about their experience. I think they feel a little disengaged and disenfranchised. Personally, it's not whether or not I've been a successful entrepreneur. I think it's more so I recognize that there's a social component here, and I'm playing it well. I've been blessed to be in the role.
So is
It's
the
cool.
app that you're making, the one that you're testing right now, is it a consumer facing app for placing orders, or is it a driver facing app for running their delivery business?
It's both. So at first, obviously, MVP, we're like not going to be able to input you ordered and then it goes to the Chipotle restaurant. Initially, it will be a Toast POS system, and essentially, what we're trying to do is cut the head of the snake off and remove all that friction. So we're hoping to kind of integrate that over time. So it's both a customer and driver app.
What are you anticipating as your biggest challenges over the next 6 to 12 months? Getting this to the next levels, obviously the app's there. What are these challenges that you're thinking are coming up in the next 6 to 12 months? Are you going to see the marketplaces trying to take you down, Tony?
I'll tell you this: I've had two players already call me. I won't mention who. One good, one like, oh, can you do this for us? Tony, can you do this? They should be terrified. Personally, I think that they should be terrified because they've sold for a long time, be your own boss to the driver, and they're not giving it to them. And I'm about to give that to them. And so they're going to turn to me, and I know all the drivers. I've been a driver. I sound like a driver. I fit in. And I think that when drivers watch this, they're inspired by me. They look at me, they're like, oh man, thanks, Tony. I appreciate that. I've always wanted to do this, but I couldn't. Maybe I didn't have enough money or I didn't have enough time or whatnot. And so if you're asking about the story, I think that the story meshes well. And I flew down to Los Angeles a couple weekends ago to film the documentary of Tony Delivers, and I think that will add to the story. I think that at first glance you think, oh man, Tony kind of knows his shit, but at the same time, the backstory will help get fits in being disenfranchised, and I think that will really speak to the drivers as they know that I'm trying to win for all parties involved, for the customers, for the restaurants, for the drivers. I'm trying to make it as fair as possible, and I think that I don't think that the bigger players can really say that. I think that they're just trying to get their cash, which is fine. I understand.
So how do you think the next 5 years will evolve for Tony Delivers? What are you aspiring for?
5 years. I saw that question and I was like, oh wow, like the fact that you asked that question means that you probably believe in this a little bit too. I'll answer it like this. I don't know. There's a guy, his name's Simon Sinek. He like talks about the idea of why, like why people will follow or why people will do stuff. And I've had about 25 engineers call me, UX, UI, back end for Microsoft, front end for Amazon, back end for Amazon, reach out to me. I've had people try to invest. I've had VCs reach out. They think I'm cooking, and maybe I'm cooking, but I think of it more like this. I'm really a guy that's trying to get you to feel that autonomy. And I think that innovation isn't going to come from some big conglomerate pouring billions of dollars. Just look at the story of the Wright brothers. The Wright brothers weren't favored. No one spoke about them. They had a bunch of people that just believed in them. And then the other person that was involved, which you don't even hear the name of, they were throwing money at. They were, everybody was like, this is going to be the guy. They had a Time magazine or publications about him. And I'm not doing this because I'm like, oh man, I want the notoriety. In fact, I get nervous a little bit every time I have to speak because I do understand that maybe a driver or a customer might feel, oh man, I don't really agree with that. And I have to get over that. And if the city of Seattle allows me to get past this 3 to 6 month hurdle, 5 years is possible. They have a very strong law on what we can and we can't do. If they really want to give the drivers what they want, they would let it play with those basic economic principles, just supply and demand. And I think that we would get to an answer. If food delivery, if it's too expensive, people won't order. If it's too cheap, then drivers don't make enough money. I think that's just a basic question. And I don't understand how it's so hard. What's stopping it? I feel like there's probably one player in this that wants to get to that answer, and all the other players, they're trying to get to another answer. And then the other thing is what are the big players doing to subsidize or try to counter the non-peak times of the food delivery? It needs to be paired with something else. They're trying to pair it with Instacart or food grocery, and I don't believe it. I don't believe that. The question is, what can I do for you when I'm at your door? I introduced a service that has not taken off. We've only done a couple 20 returns. The idea is that DoorDash and Uber Eats are A to B logistics, and they're trying to introduce A to B to C to D logistics and smaller portions. But I think that's a losing battle because there's too much variation there, and I think that there needs to be some sort of centralization. So the business that they're trying to build is a lot different than what I'm trying to build. Essentially, what we're trying to build is it's not just food delivery, it's logistics and other kind of services. I don't think that you can get to that point without trust. We're going to throw a bunch of different solutions to the problem to induce trust. And I think that over time, by what we're offering, we're going to definitely beat them by price because there's no way they can beat us by price. The way that I view my business is that, or this business right here for me and my team is you go to a restaurant and you pay how much more for straws? You don't even know because it's just already baked in there. And the problem with DoorDash and Uber Eats is they need $15, $20 to pay their engineers to do a bunch of shit. Luckily for me, I know with ChatGPT and we got stuff cooking, and I've been cooking for a while.
Does Tony Delivers have to comply with the pay up law?
I don't know.
Because it's your own business.
We'll see what happens. The problem with the law that they wrote, or the challenge, I think personally, is that they don't want it to play by basic economic principles. They want to introduce a concept of it's got to cost a certain amount, but demand won't meet that because it doesn't make a lot of economic sense. So like the consumer is going to just bluff at that. And I think that the question is like, should a $3 delivery exist? Probably not. Should a $4 delivery exist? Probably not. Should the $5 delivery exist? Probably not. And I think the question is like, how do you move from that point to get to the consumer to understand that it's probably going to be about $8 just to move, and it's probably going to be induced by mile, but we'll see. We'll get that driver data and we'll move that bottom. And I think that the bottom for us will be significantly higher than the bottom for a DoorDash, for an Uber Eats. I had the Morning Brew interview me, and the big honcho of Uber, whatever his name is, I think his name's Dara. They basically broke down this chart, and it was like the average delivery was like $7.50 is what they're paying out to the driver, or something along those lines. DoorDash has figured out a way to pay the driver 46% of that wage, and Uber Eats has found a way to pay like 45% or something. But the problem, I think, is you're going to give drivers tips. Then that's going to vary the rate. Then you're also going to get a different person there at the door, because stability is a driver in people's lives. They're playing with fire, and I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a data scientist, but I think that majority of the delivery market is probably made up by 20% of the drivers. 20% of the drivers have already listened to me. I've trended on 5 or 6 DoorDash Reddits. I've trended on 3 or 4 Seattle Reddits. That's not me being like, oh man, I'm the big guy. I'm saying like literally, like people know about this. And I think that if they know, what ends up happening is that all we got to do is just give them a little more hope and get them out there making money. I think that they would turn around and say, you know what? I'm not making as much on Tony Delivers right now, but I see it as an investment. And that to me is an interesting question, because again, Microsoft backend engineers, Amazon front end backend engineers, people are reaching out. They're reaching out because they believe the idea has an opportunity to win, and it'd be pretty cool to see that happen. If I was leading that, would be pretty cool.
Tony, we're going to be looking on with a lot of interest. Meredith and I, over the last 6 years or so, have met many entrepreneurs that have certainly disrupted this space. We're excited to see where you take it. We're hopeful that maybe a few more of the drivers out there are going to hear about your story after listening to you today. But good luck to you. Keep in touch. Appreciate it. And we'll hopefully hear from you again soon. All the best.
Thank you. Take care. See you guys.
The Digital Restaurant Podcast is available for you to follow and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts. Watch us, rate us, and subscribe to The Digital Restaurant on YouTube, and follow along on all our social media digital restaurant channels. Thanks for listening.